Hey guys, welcome to Hughes History, where you're not going to watch a history lecture. No sirree, Bob. I wonder who made that up, no sirree, Bob. But what we are going to do is engage ourselves in a little bit of the political talk, because it's an American sport. So some new kind of videos where we talk about kind of issues that are in politics, and I'm going to try to present both sides as fairly as I can, and then you guys are going to continue the game down in the comments below. So we're going to take a hot one. See, look at me tossing it around. And that is the question of whether or not the federal government should be funding Planned Parenthood. So before we get into kind of the pros and the cons, yes, we should, no, we shouldn't, I'd like to define some variables, give you a little context if you know what I mean. So certainly understanding that Planned Parenthood has its roots really early in the 20th century. In 1916 in Brooklyn, Margaret Sanger opened up basically the first birth control center for women, giving them access to some type of control over their reproductive health. That was then turned into the American Birth Control League in 1921. They didn't like the sound of that name. Birth Control League doesn't have a certain ring to it like Planned Parenthood. And it was renamed Planned Parenthood in 1942. And today, that organization, it's kind of a non-profit corporation with over 159 affiliates that run 650 healthcare clinics across the United States for both men and women, of course, predominantly used by the ladies. They are the nation's largest service provider for family planning. And no doubt about it, they are the nation's largest service provider for abortions as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but obviously they offer abortion. They also offer family planning services as it comes to counseling and STD testing. They do cancer screenings and diabetes screenings and other types of contraceptive offerings and education programs and such like that. But I think it's important that we kind of discuss the funding model so we all kind of can agree on some things. Number one, they don't receive direct payouts from the government directly, in a sense, like here's a check, we're funding you. 75% of the funds that Planned Parenthood gets from the federal government come through Medicaid spending. So in a sense, they're like a doctor or a hospital that provides services, and if you have Medicaid, that money comes through the federal government. Now, none of that money can technically be spent on abortion services. That's called the Hyde Amendment. That was passed by Congress in 1977, and that disallows federal funds kind of going to abortion payments. But we'll talk about kind of how that, can be viewed in different ways. And there's also something called Title X, Title X. This was signed into law by Richard Nixon, a Republican who believed that women that were without insurance, that were indigent, should have some type of access to family planning. He thought it just made good sense. Not abortion services, this is actually before Roe versus Wade, but having some type of access to contraceptive control over the reproductive health. So Title X is, in a sense, direct payments to Planned Parenthood so they can use that money to cover women that don't have insurance, that are just kind of walking in the street, so they can have some type of access to that type of insurance. Now, much of this controversy has kind of come to the forefront with the proposal of healthcare reform, repealing Obamacare, and Republicans had written into the law that no Medicaid funds would be going to Planned Parenthood anymore. So why don't we take a look first at people that support keeping the funding going for Planned Parenthood. They would oppose this Republican move, and they would start off by saying that, why are we having this discussion to begin with? Abortion is a constitutional right, whether you like it or not, that was first upheld in 1973 by Roe versus Wade. So if you don't like that, maybe you should change that decision. But meanwhile, women are just exercising their rights. And why do you have your pants up all in a bundle anyway? We have the Hyde Amendment. And the Hyde Amendment means, of course, that you can be personally relieved of any kind of guilt because your taxpayer dollars aren't going into that payment or that redistribution through Medicaid that's funding that abortion. That's being paid some other way. And another piece of that argument is that these Planned Parenthood clinics are offering services that nobody else would offer. Now, sure, part of that is abortion services. And again, we go back to that constitutional right. If you eliminate Planned Parenthood, where are these women going to go? Are they going to have to, hitch a ride to another state to get an abortion? And again, they offer other types of services. So when you cut off abortion services, you're also cutting off to many women in these rural areas, especially, access to family planning, like contraceptives, which means they're going to have more unwanted babies, which is a bad thing. There's going to be more STDs because Planned Parenthood not only does STD screening, but they do it anonymously. I mean, what teenager having sex is going to go to the family doctor that their whole family goes to and goes, I think I might got the you know what? That's probably not going to happen. So advocates of this funding model say Planned Parenthood does good work, and in the long run, they are stopping abortion. Now, Planned Parenthood does, of course, as we said, provide abortions, and the number's really high. It's about 320,000 abortions a year. But they also say, Planned Parenthood, that if they weren't there because of the family planning services that they provide, that there would be another 600,000 possible abortions or unwanted pregnancies because of the lack of contraceptives and family planning that many women would face. Now, there are, of course, many people that support defunding Planned Parenthood, and they have some strong arguments as well. Number one, they say, whether we have the Hyde Amendment or not, by okaying these Medicaid payments and Title X payments to Planned Parenthood, taxpayers are keeping them in business. And in a sense, that funding is fungal in nature, that, they're going to use the money to pay the bills. They don't care if it comes out of the Medicaid money or the abortion money. It's all mixed together. Therefore, Americans are all mixed up with the ugly business of abortion. And people that advocate for cutting off the funding would probably say that while constitutionally, yeah, abortion might be legal, that doesn't make it moral. And that doesn't mean that the United States government should, in a sense, prop up these types of institutions will provide this service, which many Americans believe violate their very basic religious beliefs. So that's probably their number one argument. Now, they also argue that abortion plays a much larger role that Planned Parenthood is kind of giving into. Now, Planned Parenthood says that only 3% of their services go kind of to abortion. But that doesn't mean that they're not getting a lot of money from that abortion. And actually, 1/3 of the funds that Planned Parenthood makes comes from those abortion services. So that's a pretty large number. And people that are against Planned Parenthood also say that 3% stat is kind of misleading because they're including every time you hand out a condom as a service. So that makes that number really, really high, like 10 million services. So that abortion number might be thrown in there. You get an aspirin, you get a condom, you get an abortion. Abortion only made up 1/3 of that visit. And they would say that's kind of giving the wrong impression. And they also say that Planned Parenthood advocates for abortion. They make that argument that many women wouldn't get the abortion if Planned Parenthood wasn't there. And they believe that community centers and county health departments and even ERs can handle the holes that would be kind of created by cutting off funding to Planned Parenthood. Another big argument against Planned Parenthood from these forces are they sell body parts. We have videos, they sell body parts. And certainly they do. They were caught doing it. In at least 2 states, they were selling body parts to companies. Now, the question is whether or not that was legal and whether or not that was ethical and whether or not they were profiting. Now, legally, they can't profit. And they actually did show through kind of investigations that the amount they were charging between $50 and $100 was in line with what kind of that rate would be, not for a profit, but for the cost associating, and this is what Planned Parenthood says, for the transportation and for the storage and for all of the other medical expenses that go into making that sale happen, and that it is perfectly legal. This is what Planned Parenthood says, and they say that because of stem cell research and congressional law, that we're allowed to do this so that these discarded fetuses, in a sense, aren't going to waste, that they're going to research facilities that are going to find cures for some of the diseases that we just don't have cures for. Now, there's also this argument of saving money. It's $500 million a year. So, of course, the GOP and Republicans who want to cut off funding saying we're going to save $500 million a year. Now, of course, people that are on the other side of the fence would say you're not saving that money. That money's just going to go to other clinics and other healthcare providers because you're not, in a sense, directly funding Planned Parenthood. You're funding the services, non-abortion services that Planned Parenthood is covering. And one more argument is that, people are against Planned Parenthood. They believe it's a Democratic front, that they are just raising money to give it to, Democratic politicians, and it's just a big front. It's a big conspiracy. And certainly, while it is true that Planned Parenthood affiliates such as super PACs, like Planned Parenthood Votes, have raised a lot of money, like $6 million last cycle, and of course they're going to give it to Democrats. But Planned Parenthood itself, the one that receives Medicaid funding and Title X money, they're legally not allowed to use that money for campaigns or to give it to candidates and such like that. That would be wrong, and it would be wrong if you're not smarter after watching this video. What do you think? Do you think that the federal government should cut off funding to Planned Parenthood? Why don't you go have a nice American discussion down in the comments below? You don't even have to be an American. You just have to be a human being. Maybe a cyborg, I don't know. All right, guys, make sure you subscribe to Hughes History, because if you're not doing it, you're part of the problem. And make sure that you like and you share and you tweet and you Facebook these types of videos so we can grow the collective brain and get me more subscribers. How about that? All right, guys, I say it at the end of every talk I do and lecture I do, because I believe it with all my heart. Where attention goes, energy flows, and we'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons.